Lois McMaster Bujold is an American speculative fiction writer. She is one of the most acclaimed writers in her field, having won the Hugo Award for Best Novel 4 times, matching Robert A.Heinlein's record, not counting his Retro Hugo. Her novella The Mountains of Mourning won both the Hugo Award and Nebula Award. In the fantasy genre, The Curse of Chalian won the Mythopoeic Award for Adult Literature and was nominated for the 2002 World Fantasy Award for Best Novel, and both her 4th Hugo Award and 2nd Nebula Award were for Paladin of Souls. In 2011 she was awarded the Skylark Award. In 2013 she was awarded the Furry Award. The bulk of Bujold's works comprise 3 separate book series: the Writer.She saga, the Chalian series, and the Sharing Knife series. Biography. Bujold is the daughter of Robert Charles McMaster and attributes her early interest in science fiction, as well as certain aspects of the Writer.She saga, to his influence. He was editor of the monumental non-destructive testing handbook generally referred to as McMaster on Materials. Bujold writes that her experience growing up with a world-famous father is reflected in the same experience that her characters have of growing up in the shadow of a great man. Having observed this tendency in both genders, she wonders why it is always called great man's son syndrome, and never great man's daughter's syndrome. Quote, her brother, an engineer like the father, helped provide technical details to support her writing of Falling Free. She became a member of science fiction fandom, joined the Central Ohio Science Fiction Society, and co-published Stardate, a science fiction fanzine in which a story of hers appeared under the byline Lois McMaster. Bujold currently lives in Minnesota. She is divorced and has 2 children. Her daughter and Bujold is a Portland, Oregon metal artist, welder, and vice president of the Northwest Blacksmith Association. Science fiction. Lois Bujold read 3 books before The Warrior's Apprentice was accepted after 4 rejections. The Warrior's Apprentice was the first book purchased, though not the first Writer.She book written, nor would it be the first one to be published. On the strength of The Warrior's Apprentice, Iron Books agreed to a 3-book deal to include the 2 bracketing novels. Thus began her career in writing in science fiction. By 2010, Iron Books claimed to have sold 2 million copies of Bujold's books. Bujold is best known for her Writer.She saga, a series of novels featuring Miles Writer.She, a physically impaired interstellar spy and mercenary admiral from the planet Barrier, set approximately 1,000 years in the future. Earlier titles are generally firmly in the space opera tradition with no shortage of battles, conspiracies, and wild twists, while in more recent volumes, Miles becomes more of a detective. In A Civil Campaign, Bujold explores yet another genre, a high society romance with a plot that pays tribute to Regency romance novelist Georgette Heyer. It centers on a catastrophic dinner party, with misunderstandings and dialogue justifying the subtitle, A Comedy of Biology and Manners. The author has stated that the series structure is modeled after the Horatio Hornblower books, documenting the life of a single person. In themes and echoes, they also reflect Dorothy L. Sayers' mystery character Lord Peter Wimsey. Bujold has also said that part of the challenge of writing a series is that many readers will encounter the stories in utter random order, so she must provide sufficient background in each of them without being excessively repetitious. Most recent printings of her Writer.She tales do include an appendix at the end of each book, summarizing the internal chronology of the series. Bujold has discussed her own views on the optimum reading order for the Writer.She series in her blog, Fantasy. Bujold also wanted to break into the fantasy genre, but met with early setbacks. Her first foray into fantasy was The Spirit Ring. She wrote the book on spec, shopped it around, and found low offers, sending her back to Bayern Books, where Jim Bayern bought it for a fair price in exchange for the promise of more Vorkosigan books. Bujold called this experience very educational, combined with the mediocre sales of and lack of critical acclaim for that book. She would not attempt to break into the fantasy market again for almost another decade with The Curse of Chalian. This book was also written on spec and offered up to a book auction. This time, she met with considerable critical and commercial success by tapping into a crossover market of fantasy and romance genre fans. The fantasy world of Chalian was first conceived as a result of a University of Minnesota course she was taking about medieval Spain in her spare time. The next fantasy world she created was the tetralogy set in the universe of the Sharing Knight, borrowing inspiration for its landscapes and for the dialect of the farmers from ones she grew up with in central Ohio. She writes that her first readers who helped proofread it said she got it exactly right and they could recognize Ohio features in the descriptions and dialects. List of works. Awards. Hugo Awards wins: The Mountains of Mourning, The Wargame, Barrier, Mirror Dance, Paladin of Souls. Nominations: Falling Free, Memory, A Civil Campaign, The Curse of Chalian, Winterfair Gifts, Cryoburn, Captain Vorpatrol's Alliance. Nebula Awards wins: Falling Free, The Mountains of Mourning, Paladin of Souls. Nominations: Weatherman, Barrier, Memory, A Civil Campaign, Diplomatic Immunity. Locus Awards: Best Science Fiction Novel, Barrier, Mirror Dance, Best Fantasy Novel, Paladin of Souls. John W. Campbell Award for Best New Writer nominated.